Talk about that video.
Yeah, the video. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what should I do? It is under Content ID. So um, maybe we just post a link to it in the video right here. When I edit this, I'm going to post a link to the video that you and I watched right here, but it's under Content ID, so I can't live stream it. Um, Feel free to talk about it and quote from it if you'd like. Describe what you thought the video, how it went, and I would suggest anybody who was watching this to click on that link, watch that video, then you'll know what we were talking about.
Yeah, that works. So I mostly ignored the first 2 minutes
Yes.
of the video because the point of me sending you that video was that I think it did a very good job of um, sort of summarizing my stance on the climate change debate,
Mm-hmm.
which we had a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Where now this is a guy from Britain,
Yeah, this is an English guy.
yep, and he said that if all of England was to fall or was to sink into the water today,
Mm-hmm.
then climate emissions would only be reduced by 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of emissions are coming from, or at least the majority of growth in emissions, especially, are coming from developing nations like China and India,
Mm-hmm.
where, I mean, we're talking about countries that have a billion plus people
Mm-hmm.
at this point, and you're not going to tell them that they can't continue to develop at this point. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he mentioned that there was, if you had a hypothetical button that you could push where if you pushed it, your child will grow up and have a happy life, you know, have a family, have children, grow old, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But every day that your child lives, there will be a plume of carbon that gets pushed into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone would slam that button 100 out of 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a pretty good summarization of my thoughts on climate change as well. It does well to sort of explain that what we do in the developed world to try to solve climate change is not going to make much of a difference at all in terms of stopping our own emissions because the additional emissions that are coming out now are primarily from the developing world,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't have the ability to prevent them from developing. And even if we did, would we? I don't think we would. So the only path forward is forward with progress in technology. This is where you and I had the debate, and primary uh, my preferred method of promoting good green energy is with the carrot rather than the stick, right?
Okay.
That's where that's the video essentially in my opinion. That's where the video went with that, and I agree.
Okay. All right. I'm going to say, first of all, he starts talking about woke. This isn't woke. Environmentalism isn't wokeism. Some of the people who hold to the treatment of ethnic, racial, and sexual minorities, equality within those things, are woke, and they also hold environmental ideas. This guy saying that being environmentalist is woke is nonsense. They're two different things. I don't know why
I
he brought
agree.
up the word woke in this situation. You just described a whole bunch of environmentalist issues without using the word woke, without using anything about systemic injustices, prejudices, or the treatment of ethnic, racial, or sexual minorities. So the fact that he thinks that environmentalism is wokeism means that he's full of it. So I'm not going to use the word woke for the rest of this definition because it's not what he's talking about. He's talking about environmentalism and
Yeah, like I
saying
said,
it's woke.
I ignored
Uh,
the first 2 minutes of the video
okay.
because I agree with you. Um, I don't think that it's a matter of wokeism. I think that the environmentalism aspect
Mm-hmm.
is where my position is. That
Excellent.
I sent that video to you because uh between minutes 2 and 8 or whatever, he actually makes, I think, good points.
Okay, great. Um, environmentalism, which is what he's talking about. Now, the 2% thing of Britain, that's fine. And it's true of Britain and America because we already did our industrialization.
Developing.
We
Yeah.
did our developing, and we are no longer necessary uh, to do that. But what are those countries like China and Indonesia doing? They're building products sold in Britain, sold in America. They're polluting their area. They're releasing all this carbon to provide for us. Now, that doesn't mean we get to tell their countries what environmental laws they ought to follow, but it does give us some economic power over them. Hey, we are buying all of these things. Walmart is entirely buying all its products from China. They have the economic ability to say, hey, China, wouldn't you like to not pollute? We would like you not to pollute. We are buying your products and we would like them created a certain way. It's not ironclad, but it is something that we could do to lower those numbers from those countries. Um, so I think he's obfuscating. I think he's deflecting by saying if Britain sank down into the ocean, it would only remove 2%. No, it would remove a shitload more than 2% because guess what? Indonesia is making things there that are selling to Britain, and if they don't have to make those things anymore, they won't be releasing that carbon. They won't be polluting.
I think that so I see where you're coming from, but I think that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fact is that they're not just making things for Britain, for example.
Right.
They're
They're
making
making things
things
for lots of
for
people. Yeah.
lots of people, but primarily they're making things for themselves.
Are they?
China, uh-huh. Now, China, for example, um, has one of the world's largest steel industries. And there are a number of ways to make steel.
Mm-hmm.
Some are quite a bit cleaner than others. In the case of China, their steel production is not clean at all. It is very, very dirty. It's very uh, pollutive.
Mm-hmm.
In America, our steel production facilities are quite clean
Mm-hmm.
comparatively.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thing is that China uses a lot of its own steel because they have a lot of people. They have to build a lot of things. So reducing the demand for Chinese steel by England, for example, would not actually reduce emissions very much in that industry because China is producing that steel regardless of whether it's needed by another country.
Mm-hmm.
They will use it. And so it gets produced, and so that production causes a lot of pollution.
Right. And if we want to change that, we should use some sort of economic incentive and or government messaging and deals and uh, work with their government to produce steel the way we do that would produce less carbon. I agree that those countries are doing the most of it, and they're producing these things. And even if they are using it, you're right. If they produce all of this steel and they use it all themselves, and they're not exporting that to America, then we need to use economic leverage against them to do a better job and incentivize them somehow, like your carrot you're mentioning, to stop polluting. And if they won't do that, then we have to just keep trying. We have to apply more economic force. Um, the
How about we find ways to reduce emissions as a positive thing rather than employing the stick?
There's no way around it. If it is most profitable to pollute, they will pollute. You have to. There's no way around that. There's no economic incentive. I mean, there's no carrot more than profit. You have to make a carrot that's more profitable for them. Uh, and that is either paying them to do it a different way or creating some sort of demand for their newer, better, less pollutive product. And I'm all right with that, but that takes government intervention. It takes uh, deals between our government, our economy, and their government and economy, which is complicated and difficult. Those type of those are complicated, difficult, nuanced agreements that have to be made.
I'll agree with that. I think that possibly something that you might be uh, agreeable to
Mm-hmm.
would be maybe we have a an enhanced tariff on steel that comes in that was produced in non or not in the optimal way for carbon purposes.
Mm-hmm. And that could create a demand for the cleaner created steel. I agree. Um, if the tariff is higher than going through a more economical or a more environmentally sound uh, place, that environmentally sound place in China might see an increase in business, and then might be the new way to that they go, which would be one of those nuanced deals that I was talking about. Yeah, that is a nuanced deal that could work. Um,
Yeah. Okay. And so the carrot that I was describing
mhm,
that that is mentioned in the video essentially is to push forward and basically like figure out, okay, how do we power things with fusion, for
mhm,
example, right?
mhm,
How do we move forward uh, in order to get away from fossil fuel
mhm.
technology? That is my position is I want us to push forward and find ways to do better without the carbon technology
I agree with that sentiment.
rather than punishing the use of carbon technology in the now.
It doesn't matter what carrot you use, the Exxon is going to call it a stick. It doesn't matter what brilliant economic plan our government comes up with the Chinese government, and both economies like it. If it hurts Exxon's bottom line, they will call it a stick. They will hire millions of dollars worth of lobbyists to lobby against it. They will flood our TV screens with complaints about whoever's doing it, um, ruining their economy, and they will jack up the price of gas. And I know we've discussed the price of gas, and you don't think they do it, but I am saying I think they can and will jack up that price so
Well,
that.
everything before the part where you said jack up the price of
Okay,
gas, I'll agree with,
okay,
actually.
I will leave that out then.
Um,
They will hire those people. They will buy senators. They will push
Look, I get it.
for those things.
Our system is pretty fucked up. Um,
That's a flaw in capitalism, is what I'm ultimately getting at.
it's a flaw in the system overall. I don't know if I'd call it a flaw in capitalism. I would say that the profit motive for Exxon is to not allow us to move to a fully nuclear fission powered uh, economy, right? Like I've advocated in the past already for we most of our electricity grid should be powered by nuclear,
I'm on board
right?
for that.
Like
Okay.
that's my thinking is we should have nuclear plants everywhere. It shouldn't be coal fired plants or oil fired plants or anything like that.
Hmm.
The majority of our power should be coming from nuclear, but it doesn't happen because there's enough. I mean, yeah, there's the lobbying, but there's also the public perception. Nobody will vote for nuclear because we had a couple of disasters, not even in our country. We had Fukushima and Chernobyl
Hmm.
disasters,
Hmm.
right? That
It's yeah. It's
I'm sure that oil companies had a hand in promoting those disasters
they did.
uh, in order to sort of um, stigmatize nuclear power in the United States.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think we should be going nuclear anyway. You know,
That
it's
is fine with me, and I'm on board, and I think it would be a good idea. Um, but you have to get over those hurdles. You have to get over this hurdle of Exxon talking shit to you. You have to get over the lobbyists. You have to get over the people being afraid of it. You have to create a ton of good press for these nuclear places. And you're still going to get pushback. And if anything ever goes wrong, they'll scrap the whole thing anyway because that's scary. It's new and it's scary. Uh, I think burning coal puts more nuclear material into the air, honestly. Uh,
burning coal puts more carbon into the air. Yes,
oh,
coal is
and
one of the
oh,
dirtiest.
and nuclear, literally. Um,
What the
uh,
fuck?
I was reading about this once. Radioactive waste from coal-fired plants. From the EPA, coal contains trace amounts of naturally occurring radioactive elements. The process of burning coal at coal-fired power plants, called combustion, creates waste that contain small amounts of naturally occurring radioactive material. So they actually do let out a little bit, just because it is a thing that happens. It's a natural product. This isn't giving anybody cancer, and this is not causing uh, fallout. This is just a little bit. 1% can escape into the air. So, yeah, I agree. Coal is a bad idea. I recognize why we did it. I recognize why we're still doing it, but we need to move away from it. Um, and there are a ton of people in Appalachia and on the East Coast that are still coal miners. There are very few of them, but they have a lot of political power. And I mean, we saw Donald Trump go down there and talk about them and talk about clean coal, even though there is no such thing. Um, and he put on the hard hat, and then he talked to the coal miners, and they loved it. And then they vote for him. It's it's a thing that we have to try to move past. There are more. I mean, Arby's, the roast beef sandwich place, employs more people in this country than coal mines. But coal miners are a huge, apparently important voting bloc somehow.
In West Virginia, yeah,
Yeah, in West Virginia, and you have to win West
that's
Virginia.
about it.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and so you have to win West Virginia if you want to be the Republican president or something along those lines. So then the Republican president comes out and starts talking about this very niche issue that of coal miner jobs, and their jobs are burning the stuff that is literally harming us into the air. So
Yeah, I mean, a bad idea. I don't like coal as a power source. I think it's inefficient.
mhm,
I think it's not clean.
it's
And
yeah,
those two things combined kind of make it just shitty
it's
in
an
general.
18th century solution. You
Um,
know, let's move forward. I agree. You said the word progress, and I'm on board. Uh,
there you go.
so
Let,
to bring it back to that video though that we all watched, um, this button is short-term thinking, and I recognize that it's correct, but um, they wouldn't push the button if they thought that 2,000 tons of CO2 into the air was going to kill their children. At some point, we will get to that, and it will be too late. What we're doing, again, just like I was doing earlier in the stream, I'm predicting what's going to happen in the future. If they keep pushing the button and keep choosing to do that, it will become too late, and their children will die. And we need to educate them. We need to tell them that in these.
I don't think it'll work like that
If we
because that button does not release enough carbon to change the atmosphere substantially in a short enough period of time. Yes,
it
over time
it will
it
become too
will.
late, and their children will
However,
suffer for the pressing of the button. Great. So we
it,
need to
it you're
explain
you're
that to
talking
them.
about an expanded prisoner's dilemma,
I don't know if it's that expanded, but I understand what you're saying. That
where why is it that I have to press the button or not press the button when Jim Bob next door next to
mhm,
gets to press the button
mhm,
and he gets to have his happy family life and
mhm.
whatnot? It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It's
I agree. What's most beneficial for me is that everyone else doesn't press the button, but I do. That is
Yeah.
100%
So
best for me.
everyone's going to press the button anyway.
Right.
And the thing is, the only way we get around this is by finding a technology or developing or promoting a technology that doesn't have carbon emissions.
Great. Now, how do we get to that point? We get to that point by the people demanding it. This guy on the video is speaking strictly from the supply side, and he's given the middle finger to the demand side, and I don't comprehend why. This wokeism that he is throwing a fit about, which is actually just environmentalism. So this environmentalism of the young people that he is complaining about is the only reason these things are going to happen.
That's
Environmentalism,
false.
no. Wokeism, it's demand.
Absolutely
Why would we
false.
get supply if we don't have demand? Wokeism
Because
that he's
the
describing
the
is
better
demand.
technology,
Demand.
the cleaner, better technology
There's
is
no
actually
demand for it.
cheaper.
No, it's not. There's no demand for it.
It there absolutely
No
there
demand.
is demand for it
No.
because it's cheaper.
If there is demand for it, yes, and it's coming from the woke people. It's coming from the millennials who are saying, we see this climate disaster coming. Please give us electric cars. For the love of God, give us electric cars. Why can we not get electric cars? Electric cars start getting produced. Demand is the only thing that will get these things created. Uh, where am I
When
going?
green power is more efficient than not green power, than dirty power, the demand for green power will be way more than the demand for dirty power. That's it.
No, the demand has to come
Yes.
first. Necessity
No, no, no,
is
no.
the mother of invention. Necessity is a demand. What is the word necessity except we must have this? This is a demand. The woke people that he is bitching about are demanding climate action. And there will be no invention. There will be no invention without that necessity. There will be no invention. There will be no progress without those woke people complaining and saying, we demand this progress
First of
happen.
all, I already disinherited that part about
Okay.
the woke people.
Well, then he's a
Okay.
goofball. Okay, great. I am going to stop talking about
It's
him and call it environmentalism.
there you go. Environmentalism is fine. I am telling you that when green technology is cheaper than fossil fuel technology, the demand for that green technology will be much more than the demand for fossil fuel technology.
You're thinking like a supply side economist. If there is no demand for that green technology, it will not be created. There was no demand for electric cars,
If
so
it's
they were not
possible to be
created.
more efficient with green technology, there will always be somebody trying to develop it. Because the profit incentive is I can develop this green technology and I can outcompete all of the fossil fuel technology people.
You can't outcompete Exxon. They own
Yeah, you can.
so much. They own so many people already. They are lining the pockets of politicians. And when you create, let's say, a uh, a solar panel that works and works better, you get it put on the White House by Jimmy Carter, and then Reagan comes in and is pressured by fossil fuel companies to take them down. This isn't just, hey, I invented a new thing and everybody's going to take it. No. It's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as, hey, I've created something that's more efficient. You then, one, you have to invent it. Then you have to get it accepted, and you have to overcome all of the people like Exxon who are standing in your way. Electric cars could have been created earlier, possibly, but there was no demand for them until millennials and young people who see these environmental problems coming demand uh, electric cars. They demand companies be environmentally conscious.
Except
Does
for the part where
Mhm.
we absolutely had the technology where electric cars are not actually that much more clean,
I know
that
that.
much cleaner than fossil fuel cars
I know that.
because they still have to plug into the wall, and that wall is getting its electricity from fucking coal-fired power plant.
I know that. And I am demanding that they do something better.
Yeah, like nuclear.
I'm demanding it. Great. But that guy in that video would call me woke for demanding such. And then at the end,
No, he wouldn't.
He pisses and moans at the end of that video and says, do something. Why are you just complaining about things? Why are you pointing out all the necessity? Why do you sit around on your phone telling us your demand? Go do something. Because they're young. They don't get to do anything yet. They're still in their education. Young people don't own anything.
I will say that
Young people
he
aren't in a
doesn't
position.
actually put forth a decent resolution. Like, if you're gonna bitch about something, you should probably have a solution for it. Here's my solution: we move to nuclear fission for our power plants across the country in all developed countries.
Even if you don't have a solution, you're allowed to bitch about something. You are allowed to do the necessity bit. Hey, we need something better than burning coal.
Well, I'll agree with you that
Demand,
he's bitching, and I think that there is a solution, which is what I'm saying is
which is
that
good.
if he's gonna bitch the way that he is, then he should be presenting a solution as well, which is nuclear.
I agree with your solution. And I'm going to say one more thing about him. He is complaining about the people doing the necessity and telling them to do the invention bit. And the reason they can't yet is because they're young and they don't own anything. Young people don't own anything. The millennials don't own homes. They don't own businesses. They're not allowed to own these things. The entire world was bought before I was born. It's not like I get to strike out to a new place and go explore things that aren't. Every border is drawn. The entire world is owned and operated by somebody. So I have to start at the bottom and work my way up. And if I start at the bottom, all I can do
Now
is
we hear
point out necessary. All the necessity. All I can do is tweet about how we need to do better. And this guy's complaining about it. But I'm going to stop talking about him. and say that yes, we have a necessity right now, and I am pointing it out. I am using my voice to say there's a necessity to avert climate change. Now, what is the invention? You're suggesting that the invention that could avert that climate change is a nuclear power plant, and I agree. I think that is a fine idea. I think that if it were built properly and maintained strictly according to very important and very well thought out guidelines, it could get us away from burning fossil fuels.
It's already possible. Florida, most of Florida is actually powered by nuclear power plants right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the state that's hit by the most hurricanes out of any state in the union.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we can do it.
Okay, so the invention exists.
It exists. It's a matter of pushing for it.
That's
So
the necessity bit. That is where you get online and you tell people, hey, this is what we need to be doing. Hey, can we
right,
do
except that
this?
it's not. Except the people online are attacking the wrong thing. If the push should be, hey, we need to get nuclear. We need to be doing this around the country. The push should not be oil companies are making too much profit. We should be taxing them. That's stupid. We need to be pushing for the use of clean energy, which is the carrot, and not for punishing companies that are just doing their thing right now, which is the stick.
Yeah, but their thing is harmful. Their Exxon's just doing their thing, and their thing is
You know,
driving up
if
the
we
carbon.
did the if we just did the carrot,
This is just Amazon doing their
built
thing.
if we built nuclear power around the country, you would see a reduction in carbon emissions and you would see cheaper electricity. And that means that you would see a greater adoption of electric cars, which means you would see less people purchasing gas, which means you would need less refineries, which means you would have fewer oil or less oil production.
Okay, I'm on board with that plan. I think it's a good
Great.
idea. I think we can do the other part too. I don't. I don't think we. I think we can carrot and stick. We carrot one side and we stick the other. You can do both. You don't have to do only one.
Yeah, see, I like my idea.
I know.
Uh I don't I think that in the meantime, uh the stick is it doesn't just hurt companies, it hurts people as well. I think that it results in less production of the materials that we need in the now, which will increase prices. And those prices, of course, end up hurting the average person.
I think that you are right. If we only do the stick, you're right. Those prices would go up, and that would increase our necessity. And hopefully, people would look either create inventions or look for solutions, aka inventions, and they would find nuclear, and they would find this uh, nuclear power plant that could solve their problems, and they would push for it. Um, Social media is broadly a place where you can find the necessity and you can find ideas about what needs to be invented. And if we were using social media for those purposes, I think we'd be a lot better off.
Sure. And my thing is that instead of bitching about oil companies, we should people that are on social media doing this should be advocating for nuclear power. That's the difference. Is is bitching versus advocating, I
Okay,
think.
okay. It's way easier to bitch, so you're always going to get more of it. Um, and solutions are hard, but pointing out flaws and pointing out necessity is easy. So you're always going to have more of it. There's always going to be more pointing at problems than there is problem solving. I mean, that's just the law. I think that's just numbers, you know. Um, And I think you're right that if we wanted things to be better, we would provide solutions. And even if, I mean, I think the issue you're going to run into is that the people who want the solution aren't the people who are going to profit from the solution. If the solution is nuclear, the people who don't profit from that are going to stand in your way.
Everyone profits from nuclear.
Except Exxon. They're going to stand in
Even
your way.
they do, because if if the alternative is that our planet becomes a hellscape, then everyone profits from the use of nuclear.
Not in the next quarter. They have next quarter's numbers to hit. And if they don't hit next quarter's numbers, they're going to have to lay people off, and that drives their stock price down, and then their stock price is going down, and that is
Well, that's
unacceptable.
true. It's a good thing
You
that
know,
it takes a
it's
decade to build a nuclear power plant,
I know, and hopefully,
which gives
yeah,
Exxon a lot of time to adjust and plan and prepare for the shifting landscape.
right. But they'd rather it be 11 years. And now we run into this thing like, yeah, it takes 10 years, and they could create a 10 start tomorrow with a 10-year plan on here's how much market share we're possibly going to lose. But the most productive thing, the most profitable thing for them is if it were 11 years away. And you know what's even more than profitable than 11 years away? 12 years away.
At some point, things have to change,
I
and
hope
if we
so. I
decide
think you're
that,
right.
then
You're pointing out necessity right now, and I think you're right. It needs to change, and we need to do it soon because climate change is happening.
I'll say this: even if it isn't climate change that does us in, um, we do have to stop putting carbon into the air.
Hmm.
Um,
There is another.
the carbon in the atmosphere
Hmm.
is being absorbed by the ocean,
Hmm.
which is making the ocean more acidic,
Hmm.
which is killing animals or
Right.
killing fish, wildlife in the water.
Right.
Uh, and that's also bad. So even if we have our disagreements on anthropogenic climate change,
Hmm.
I'll agree we need to stop putting carbon in the air.
And the
And
only way to do
that
that
actually is
is,
part of your article there. You just
yeah,
highlighted it
you
with
were
that.
talking about it, and I'd seen it earlier. So yeah, I've highlighted it there. That is important. And if bringing that down from 30% to 29% causes BP to lose a percentage in their stock, they're going to be against it. And there's only one way to, you have to tell people that. You have to be environmentally noisy. You have to be loud. You have to tell people. You have to talk about it. You have to complain about it a lot on social media, or else it won't happen. Or if we're not talking about these things, if we're not complaining, if we're not pointing out the necessity, if we're not online telling people, hey, this is necessary, it won't happen. And if it does happen, then BP will, or Exxon will come back and be like, yeah, this was totally unnecessary.
Here's
And
the thing
here's the
is that
bad
I
stuff.
think the messaging for necessity is wrong.
You would
I think that
message from
for
invention.
me, I still have my questions about climate change,
Hmm.
but I do know that the oceans are becoming more acidic,
Hmm.
and it's because they're absorbing the carbon from the atmosphere that we're putting into it.
Hmm.
Except for the fact that most people don't know that.
Yeah, and we
So
could educate them
why
on
is
that.
climate change the primary argument when it should be, hey, you're not going to be able to eat salmon in a couple of decades?
Well, this is part of climate change. Climate change is a very large uh, umbrella, and this is one part of it.
That's, I mean, that is my thing is you've at this point known me long enough that I actually do argue for green power,
Hmm.
but I don't necessarily buy, and you've also heard me argue against this. I don't necessarily buy the climate change argument,
Hmm.
but that ocean pH thing is definitely uh inarguable. I mean, that's literally like we've measured that it's happening, and it's most likely because we're putting so much carbon into the air
Hmm.
that the ocean is absorbing it.
The same scientists that studied that are climatologists, and they said that the increase in carbon creates a greenhouse effect, which heats up the planet.
No, no, no.
And
I'm saying that I get what you're saying
mhm,
there. I'm saying that hey, I've got a measurable thing here.
okay,
That's a problem. It's because carbon,
okay,
right? You can argue like there are people that will argue against carbon being a greenhouse gas.
hmm,
There are people that will say that it's because of our solar cycle that temperatures are changing. There are people that will say, "Hey, it was hotter back in the medieval times than it is now."
hmm,
All of those things are irrelevant when you just say, "Hey, you're going to kill all the fish,
hmm,
and then you won't be able to fish and eat salmon and halibut and whatnot."
hmm,
Uh, you know, in a decade or two, because the pH will be too high or too low. That is,
hmm.
it'll be too acidic. They'll all be dead. And guess what? All those delicious fish that you used to love eating won't be there anymore. That is a more solid case, I think, than climate change. Straight up, it just is.
If you say so, okay, that's fine. But um, okay,
For the
great.
immediate, for the
You've
person
got
like,
you've been convinced that this is a problem by
I always have been.
somebody giving you. Well, somebody had to explain that to you at some point. I mean, you had to learn about it from some source. You learned about it. You learned about that 30% increase in acidity. You learned this at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the convincing argument for me,
okay.
actually. That's the one that I was like, all right, even if I do have my skepticism about climate change itself, the ocean's acidity definitely can't be ignored.
Okay.
It's one of those things that's measurable. It's one of those things that we can literally stick like a vial in the water and test the pH of it and whatnot, and be like, oh shit, like we're kind of fucked
Okay.
if this continues. Like,
Okay. Great. So,
but if that was the thing that convinced me, then that should be the thing that's being used to convince everybody else.
and it's mentioned, but you're smarter about the ocean than a lot of people, um, or more willing to look at it. So the issue. So now you have been educated on this issue. You have determined that this is an important necessity. This needs to be fixed. This is an issue. This is a problem. We need an invention, a solution.
Yeah,
And you've come to a solution, and I like that, and it's great. I agree with your solution, and the reason, uh, and I think we have to highlight the necessity. We have to talk about it. We have to convince people that it is a necessity, that it is important, that it needs to be done, and we need to use social media. The young people who are the environmentalists are telling us that it's necessary and it needs to be done, but they're not in charge of anything. They don't run anything. They're not in charge of large companies. They're not in charge of the coal mines. They're not responsible for hiring people to dig up coal and burn it. They're not in a position to do any of these things. They can invent something. Honestly, we don't. I don't know that we need an invention. We just need more trees. Um, we need. If there were a machine that could take the carbon out of the air, that's a great idea. Let's
that
create it.
exists.
I know, but who's going to pay for it? Who's going to buy a carbon machine to take carbon out of the air? What company, what corporation, what capitalistic device do you use to suck the carbon out of the air. And is that machine better than just planting trees? I don't know. I've never looked into carbon capture devices, but trees are carbon capture devices. I mean, trees, they just are. Um, but again, what does it take for trees? It takes time, first of all. Two, it takes space. You know, those are the two most important things on the planet, right? Those are the two most powerful economic forces in the world, are there time and space? Uh,
Sure.
so you need a lot of time and you need a lot of empty space. That space could turn a bigger profit if it were a strip mall. So strip malls get made rather than planting trees.
Well, yeah, and like we discussed last week, I mean, I'm not against the government doing something,
Okay.
right? Like uh last week we talked about the outages in Texas from
Mm-hmm.
frozen trees breaking and then destroying power lines, and I said, well, there might need to be some regulations about power lines that
Mm-hmm.
need to be run underground instead of run as power lines in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yes, there at some point there is some kind of action that does have to take place governmentally.
Okay. And
And this
if
is one area where I'd say, okay, well, maybe I know that devices do exist to pull carbon out of the water, for example. What if we subsidized the building of those, or we just funded the building of those to do that, right? Um, California is one area where I think that that would be really beneficial
mm-hmm.
because you could, at the same time as pursue carbon removal from the water, you could also use those same facilities that you build as desalination plants, where you take the carbon and the salt out of the water, so you can actually replenish the fresh water that California needs because they're constantly in a fucking drought.
uh, where do you do with all that salt? We have nothing to do with it right now. You can. It is entirely possible for human beings to take desalinization efforts, but it leaves you with a bunch of waste salt. And what do we do with it? You
I
throw it
don't
in the
know,
ocean.
ionize it,
You,
sell it.
there's not enough demand for that. So the only reason that's not happening is because there's no real good invention for it. If we bury it in the place with all the nuclear waste, that's a possibility, but it's expensive. And it would be cheaper and easier to just buy water from somewhere else, which is why they've gone that route.
Some
California
of
is
it
always
does
on the
have to
lookout. Yeah.
go back to the ocean because you don't want to change the salinization, uh, which would kill a
If
lot of
you're
animals.
if you're taking water out of the ocean and the salt with it, I mean, it wouldn't change the percent of salinization, right?
It would over time
If I
because
if I
if you
took
don't
one
put
bucket
that
of
salt back in,
no, there
then when it rains,
when it rains, okay, you're right.
then
Rain.
yeah, you have to have that salt still there.
Okay,
So you do have to manage the salinization of the ocean
okay.
if you were to do that.
That sounds large, difficult, and I'm on board for the government doing that. I think that's a good thing that the government could do. But
I'm telling you, just elect me.
I don't think,
The whole country will be powered by nuclear, and we'll have desalinization plants working in California
and
to solve droughts.
the Republicans would run against you. They would.
I'd fuck them over.
They take money from Exxon. They take money from oil companies. They take money from uh, the people who do not want this to happen because it will hurt their bottom line. Here's the ANWR, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I would suggest that this large piece of land is removing carbon from the air. And when do we hear about this in the news? Only hear about this in the news when Republicans want to drill to take out the oil and Democrats tell them no. This is the ANWR that Republicans want to drill and take all the oil out of so that it will bring prices down. And the Democrats say no. And what generally happens is it turns into a partisan fight. Um, they it is long term environmentally friendly to leave this place alone, but it's short term economical an economic boon to drill all the oil out of there. And I think if we want to slowly, cheaply uh, get rid of carbon, if we want to slowly and cheaply remove carbon from the air, we don't need a bunch of machines to do it. We don't need desalination machines. We don't need things that you put under the water that take the carbon out and then create a byproduct of some sort that we have to take out and then bury. Just plant trees. We need large swaths of the world to be reforested. But
And I
that,
argued for that
and
before.
I know you did, and I think that it's a good idea. But it would reduce the amount of profitable land that we have. You know, we might have to bulldoze a few strip malls. We might have to close down a few Best Buys. We might have to bulldoze some Walmarts to have the room for the trees. And that's why it will never be done.
I
And
have to look up a stat real quick
I know
because
that I'm just talking necessity right now, but all I'm doing is talking. I know that I'm just pointing out necessities. I'm pointing out being the woke guy that the guy in the video was complaining about. Yeah, how much carbon?
I'm just checking because I have to be correct when I say the next thing that I
Sure, sure.
say. So I'm sorry if you can hear my tapping on the keyboard.
No, you're good. You want me to keep talking, or am I distracting
Go for it.
you? Okay. Um, when you look at a tree, note that about 5% of the tree is comprised of leaves, 15% is stems, 60% goes to its trunk, and 20% roots. Uh, in 1 year, a mature tree will absorb more than 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releases oxygen in exchange. So 48 pounds a year. And I would even go so far as to suggest that we grow them and then create a system where we're always growing more and then chopping down the oldest ones when they get too old, and so that they don't burn and stuff like that. And then we create a system. Uh, the government would have to step in and create some sort of a cycle where we're constantly growing new trees, taking carbon out of the air, and then chopping down the old ones, either using them or just bury the damn things. Because then the carbon would be in the ground where it's not harming us, where it's not creating greenhouse gases, where it's not being absorbed by the ocean. And then doomsday scenario, we all die in a horrible nuclear holocaust someday, and then the next civilization will have coal to use because we buried all the trees.
I missed a lot of that because I was reading. Sorry.
That's fine.
But
What you got?
I mean, we could just not mine the coal. We could just build nuclear power plants. It'd be really great. Then we can mine uranium instead.
Yeah, we can do
Uh,
all of these things. I want all of these things to happen.
let's see. We got about 2 billion acres of land in the
Mm-hmm.
U.S.
Mm-hmm.
The primary purpose that it's used for right now, the two main ones are cattle and forest land.
Mm-hmm.
Now cattle obviously would destroy forest land
Hmm.
because you have to cut down the trees and plant grass and shit so that the
Hmm.
cattle can feed.
Hmm.
A little different than actual forest land. Um, but I also don't think that we should be removing forest land in favor of cattle either. So we should have more forest land.
Okay. So if you wanted to, I don't know, reduce the amount of cattle, what would you do? We would make it a necessity to eat less meat. But now we're
Oh, I
woke
wouldn't
again.
do that.
Now we're woke. Now we're wokeism again, suggesting that people eat less meat.
I mean, you're never going to get me to do that. So
I know, but
uh,
I mean, even one day, meatless Mondays. Are you on board?
that's not one day. That's 52 days out of the year.
Right. That would reduce your meat consumption by a percentage, would it not?
It would.
Okay.
Although now you're talking about um, actually the funny thing is that you're bringing back almost a religious tradition.
I know that Meatless Fridays was a thing, but the
Yeah,
wokeists on
Meatless
Twitter
Fridays during Lent.
usually um, v- vegans and vegetarians are annoying. I get it. I don't like them. I'm not one of them. But the smartest of them don't suggest that somebody change their entire life and change their entire diet overnight. They suggest small things. They suggest, first of all, what's necessary. Hey, we have this much cattle land. It could be doing better. It's harming with the carbon. Here's a solution. Don't eat any meat on Monday. That's it. That would reduce your by 52 out of 365. I don't know. There's a percentage there if you want to do the math. Uh, your meat consumption would go down by a percentage. And if everybody did that, then everybody's meat consumption comes down by percentage, and there is less a demand for that meat, and reforestation becomes possible because we have less demand. We have smaller cattle fields. There are fewer of them, and so you could ideally fill that land not with another Best Buy, but with trees. But what happens when I suggest that? 1,000 people yell at me for being part of the Green New Deal and that I'm uh, kissing AOC's ass and I'm a dirty liberal who wants to take away all the fossil fuels.
Mm, I think that it's again not as black and white as you're portraying it to be. For example, reforestation is something that can happen without the without much loss of cattle lands. For example, um, a lot of time reforestation is taking place where we lose like 2% ish of the currently existing forests that gets replanted.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that you replant that a tree that's 50 years old is taking up a lot more carbon
Mm-hmm.
than a tree that's 2 years old. Uh, it's because the trees they essentially grow perpetually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the larger they grow, the more carbon that they're going to subsume. Where yes, when we cut trees down, we do plant new trees, but those trees take time to um, recapture or to be capable of capturing the same amount of carbon as the tree that was cut down.
Yeah, we would need some sort of large study to determine when is the most opportune time to plant them to harvest them, and when they die, they obviously not taking any more carbon out, so they would have to be cut down and dealt with, either to be used as lumber or to be just buried in the ground. And this is a job that only the government could do, because I don't think there is a yes, logging companies exist, but they make more money the more trees they cut down, the more lumber they sell to an extent, unless they're flooding the market. they can make more money by cutting down more trees. So we can't trust capitalism to solve this problem. This is a government land use issue. And I think land use and tree cycles are exactly the thing a government ought to be doing. But I'm going to be partisan again right now and say one side does not want that to happen. One side would stand against it no matter what. And plenty of the other side would too. But so let me say that half of the Democrats would be against this plan and all of the Republicans would be against it.
Just like me, bro. Just like me.
I know. Well, when you have
I'll put forward the study.
when you can tell the Republicans what to do, I would be much happier with them.
It's I'll take that as high praise.
Mm-hmm. I'd be much happier with them. I'd be much less doomer about them being in charge. Oh, hi. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button, press the subscribe button. If you want to tell me how right I am, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to tell me how wrong I am, leave a comment too. That's good. This is just kind of a hobby for me, so I appreciate you coming by, giving it a watch, and pressing the YouTube buttons. Thanks.